Okay, thank you. We're on. Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting will come to order. This is the regular meeting of the Land Use Committee for the Economic and Development Committee. My name is Supervisor Malia Cohen. I'm the chair of this committee, and to my left is Supervisor Jane Kim. Our clerk is Ms. Andrea Osbury. I also want to recognize Jesse Larson and Jonathan Gumwalk, who will be televising this committee on SF.gov TV. Thank you very much to the staff. Madam Clerk, do you have any announcements?
Yes, please silence all electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today may appear on the March 24th, 2015 Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Ladies and gentlemen, just wanted to let you know that Supervisor Scott Wiener requested to be excused from today's meeting. Supervisor Kim, may I please have a motion to excuse Supervisor Wiener? So moved. The motion to excuse Scott Wiener is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Okay. Could you please call item number 1?
Item number 1 is a resolution retroactively approving exercise of options to extend temporary access and use licenses.
Thank you very much. I believe DPW staff Deborah Moy is here with us and will be presenting on this item. Good afternoon, Ms. Moy.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Barbara Moy, Department of Public Works. What you have before you today is a request to extend an existing license for the use of an intersection in Mission Bay at 7th and Mission Bay. I'm going to show you on the map, Mission Bay Drive. And the location of this street and intersection is as seen on the overhead projection in blue, incorporating a segment of 7th Street and perpendicular to that Mission Bay Drive. The project consists of constructing public infrastructure improvements along this area. The Director of Public Works has issued a notice determining that the project is complete and ready for its intended use. Further, the city entered into 2 agreements. One was for the temporary access and use of a portion of this area and entered into an agreement with the developer Fossil. And a second was also another temporary access and use agreement with Alexandria Real Estate, Real Equities, to allow the public to use the completed street improvements prior to acceptance of the improvements by the board. The 2 temporary access and use agreements have expired, but require a retroactive extension and continuance to July 31st of this year, while we complete the improvements. While the completed improvements are processed to the full board for acceptance. I'll show you another portion of that. This hatched area is owned by Fossil, and this area is owned by ARE, Alexandria Real Equities. So we request that the Land Use Committee recommend the retroactive extension of the 2 agreements by the board. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's take public comment on this item. Oh, Supervisor Kim has a question for you, Ms. Moy.
Thank you, through the chair. No, it's okay. It's just a quick question.
Sure.
And I noticed that the extension is only through July 31st, 2015, so that's only a few months from now.
Well,
so are we confident that the conveyance of the street will occur to the city by then?
It will be a request for acceptance of public infrastructure and the street and acceptance of the streets, and we have pretty good confidence that we'll get the paperwork to you in time. If not, we'll have to come back for an extension. We hope not to do that. We'll try very hard to get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on item number 1? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Kim, may I have a motion on this item?
Yes, I want to make a motion to move this forward with positive recommendation to the full board.
Thank you. This motion is accepted unanimously. Madam Clerk, could you please call item number 2?
Item number 2 is an ordinance amending the general plan, repealing the 2009 housing element and adopting 2004 housing element.
Excellent. Thank you. I have a staff. We have a staff from the Planning Department that will be presenting on this item.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and Supervisor Kim. My name is Manika Mohan from the Planning Department, and I'm here to present the 2014 housing element. The housing element is a required part of the general plan and guides the city's policies as it relates to housing development. As an overall guiding document, the element provides the overarching policy framework and vision for the city's housing strategy. Future policy work will be evaluated for the consistency with the housing element. However, adoption of the housing element does not itself change city law or practice. The housing element is required by state law, and many state funds for infrastructure and community development are tied to an adopted housing element. It provides a policy framework and vision for housing in San Francisco. The housing element is broken up into two primary parts. Part one is data and needs analysis, which contains a description and analysis of San Francisco's population, household, and employment trends, as well as an assessment of existing housing characteristics and housing needs. Part two is objectives and policies, which define the city's policies and goals as it relates to housing. Additionally, the element includes implementing programs, which include a number of measures that result in specific actions to help implement the city's housing-related objectives and policies. To date, the department has been working closely with the California Department of Housing and Community Development to ensure that we have a timely adoption and a compliant housing element. 2 planning commission hearings were held, with the commission unanimously recommending the element's adoption. Additionally, staff created a website for the housing element at the end of August and released a video in November of 2014 to highlight key components of Part 1 of the housing element. The existing housing element was developed and updated through the hard work of many community and staff working groups, including a 2-year outreach effort which resulted in a community advisory board and over 30 community workshops. In drafting the 2014 housing element, staff began its outreach with key stakeholders that were involved in drafting the last housing element early in August of 2013. Noting the extensive outreach that had previously occurred, stakeholders agreed that the policy framework of the existing housing element addresses current and future housing goals for the city. The 8 issues that the element are based on provide a strong framework that has allowed and will continue to provide support for the city's initiatives related to housing. Note that the first 5 issues are required by the state, but the last 3 are unique to San Francisco, recognizing our unique neighborhood and community infrastructure needs. Given that the policy framework is strong, the Planning Department focused its efforts on Part 1, the data and needs analysis, to ensure that we have the most current data to address future policy initiatives, and Audrey Desmuke will be highlighting key components from Part 1.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and Supervisor Kim. My name is Audrey Desmuke, and I am from the department's Information Analysis Group, and I'm going to go over some of the major highlights from Part 1 of the element, the Data Needs Analysis section. As you are all probably aware of, San Francisco is growing and will only continue to grow into the future. Today, some 818,000 people call the city home. The Association of Bay Area Governments, also known as ABAG, projects that the San Francisco population will grow to be over 1 million by 2040. This equates to an overall increase of nearly 270,000 people who would need to be housed over the next 25 years. Also, ABAG forecasts a steady increase in San Francisco employment to nearly 760,000 jobs by 2040. Most of these jobs will be increased in the construction, professional service, health service, and educational service industries. Household growth, an approximation of the demand for housing, indicates a need for over 100,000 new units over the next 25 years to accommodate projected population growth. Based on these trends, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, along with ABAG, set the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, targets for housing production in every county in the Bay Area. 60% of these RHNA targets are required to be affordable to households with varying incomes.
Excuse me, may I ask a question? Do you have a copy of the presentation that you're making?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, feel free to continue.
Okay, thank you. Recently, ABAG has released San Francisco's new fair share of regional housing needs for the period covering 2015 to 2022. The new target is to produce nearly 29,000 units. With 38,000 plus entitled units in the pipeline, the city may reach this new target. The 38,000 includes nearly 24,000 net new units from major entitled development projects in Hunters Point, Park Merced, and Treasures Island. Note that these projects, however, are not all likely to be completed by 2022. While the current zoning would more than accommodate the projected housing needs, we need more detailed housing policies and implementation measures to achieve the affordable housing goals of the city and to ensure that the city meets the RHNA targets.
The policy framework, the 8 core issues, support a number of different housing-related initiatives. These include several items out of the Mayor's Housing Working Group and several other pieces of legislation and initiatives heard before this committee, including legalizing existing in-law units, reasonable modifications for persons with disabilities, as well as homeless shelter legislation. Staff also recognized that there was a need to update the implementation measures and add policies where appropriate. We have outlined new policies related to short-term rentals, displacement, and homelessness. We've also added new implementing programs around the affordable housing bonus and the newly passed Proposition K to achieve 1/3 permanently affordable housing in new area plans and special use districts. Going forward, we ask that the Land Use Committee recommend approval of the housing element to the full board. This will enable the city to keep within the required state timeline to have a completed and effective housing element by May of 2015. Thank you again for your time, and staff is available for questions.
We have a couple questions.
Thank you. First, it's great to see an all-women team of planners here before us today. The all-female land use committee appreciates it. I just want to thank you for your work on updating the housing element. And I know that Supervisor Cohen and I are certainly seeing much of this development and production happening in the 2 districts that we represent. And I really appreciate the updates around making sure we're discouraging displacement, that we're prioritizing affordable housing. I think all of that really reflects the policy conversations that we've been having over the past year. Back to your slide on the 2015-2022 planning periods, the RHNA targets. These are obviously goals that have been set by ABAG in terms of what we are meeting to produce over the next 7 years. And I know that it's hard to say because, the pipeline is some of it is predictable, although dependent on finances, and some of it is left to the unknown. But do you know what percentages of each area we are projected to meet over the same time period?
I'm going to ask Audrey, our info person.
Like you said, it's very hard to predict this. However, in our past planning period, we've ranked 3rd out of the 9 Bay Area counties in meeting our affordable housing targets.
We rank what? I'm sorry. We rank what?
3rd.
3rd. Okay.
3rd out of the 9 Bay Area counties in meeting this. But that's along with a lot of the policies and implementation measures in the housing element. I can foresee this increasing a lot with our future kind of efforts around affordable housing that I'm sure my colleagues can touch upon.
And when you say we're 3rd, what counties are number 1 and number 2 in actually meeting their RHNA target?
Alameda's number 1, and I'm not sure what number 2 is, but we're ranked number 3.
Sorry, just wanted to add in, I'm imagining your question is about how we're meeting our affordable housing goal rather than our market rate. And I think you, Audrey, were mentioning earlier today that we are about 53% of our affordable housing we think we can see in the pipeline and move forward. And that other ideas that have come out of the Mayor's Working Group, including the changes to the inclusionary housing program, the affordable housing density bonus, and other innovations that are coming from the board, like the seismic retrofit and ADUs, are ways that we're going to help fill that gap. We're really relying on a lot of those implementation strategies from the Mayor's Working Group, including any of the new resources or funding mechanisms.
Yeah, no, I'm very aware of the policy conversations because we're involved in those, especially around the Prop K goals that we have set. I think I'm more curious about where we're at currently. So of what's in the pipeline, do we know what percentage is very low income, moderate, and market rate? So we know what the gap is. So
Right.
what policy, how much do we need to meet to fit the gap? Right, so how many more very low income, how many more moderate, so that when we are talking about policies, we have a goal in mind of what we're trying to achieve.
In this pie chart, the target that we're looking at right now is this the more orange colored colors in the pie chart. As of now, we can't tell what's in the pipeline, but as we go through our quarterly reports, we're going to be able to find that information for you.
Great. And I know that our housing balance count legislation is also coming to Planning Commission this Thursday, and hopefully that can assist in us getting to the numbers. Even if the numbers are bad, like they're not what we want to see, I think it's better for us to know what that is so that we can make sure that we're building the policies to get to the number that we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions as well. I think, Audrey, for you, whoever knows the data. So on the slide on this pie chart, it says a planning period of 2015 through 2022. On the bottom, it says units in the pipeline as of 2014, September 2014. There's 38,000 entitled units. So that means they're in the process of being built, correct? They're entitled?
Not necessarily. A part of this is they're planning approved or building approved. The permits have been issued or they're under construction. So it's a combination of all those.
Okay. And do we have a sense out of the 12,536,000 above moderate, I guess these are these entitled projects?
So the numbers you see in the chart are the targets that ABAG sets. The 38,000 is just the number of units in total that we have in the pipeline. Again, the numbers in the chart are targets, not the actual numbers, not the actual breakdown of the 38,000.
Do you know how ABAG came to the conclusion or where they got these numbers or these targets from?
It's based on a lot of factors, but the trends that I talked about earlier about the projections of population growth and household growth and job growth, those are three of the main indicators that are used to make these projections.
And the slide before the this particular one, household trends, can you re-explain that to me again? What exactly is this picture trying to communicate?
This picture is basically in the middle. You'll see today we have about 345,000 households in our current housing stock, and then 2040 ABAG projects that our household growth would grow to about 450,000 households by 2040. And that's
and this is with new construction?
Yes, correct.
Does this also include, I'm curious, does it include public housing?
This is based on population, so I don't have an answer for that one.
Okay. Do you have any other questions, Supervisor? No? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Let's take public comment on item number 2. Public comment is now open. Please come up to the mic. Just as a reminder, you have 2 minutes to share your comments. Hello.
Hi, I'm Patricia Voy, Marina Cow Hollow Neighbors and Merchants, but I have represented 4 different neighborhoods throughout the last 40 years. I'm asking you not to vote for this at this time for several reasons. Number one, just what you heard. It's all pie in the sky. They're saying, yes, we're doing affordable, we're doing moderate. They always use the word affordable, but they do not talk about the income ranges of what is affordable, what is moderate affordable, what is low, high low, and what is low. It's never delineated. Number two is there's already a lawsuit about part of this, and it's going to end up in court if you do it at this time instead by rushing it through, because it's part of the 204 and 209 lawsuits. And I'm not sure if you legally can vote on this. But the big issue is the affordable housing. I've represented at-risk youth for 30 years. I'm in contact with all of them. They're all looking for places to live, and they want to stay in San Francisco and they can't. Currently, I have a case of a couple that had got lead poisoning with their child in one of the SROs, and we're trying to find another place for them to move. We found them a safe place health-wise, but it's in the same location, which is not safe. All of this has not been addressed. I've tried to get meetings with both of you. I've tried to get meetings right now with London on this issue, and I would like you to just not vote on this until this gets delineated. And I'm tired of hearing we're going to do affordable housing, and then when you see the reports, they just don't do it. They're not even paying 3 of the tall buildings downtown haven't paid into the housing deal. You ask the planning department, and they say we don't have the money to chase after it.
Thank you very much. I have a question for the City Attorney's Office. Are there any legal issues that are precluding us from voting on this item today?
Deputy City Attorney John Gibner. No, there is ongoing litigation in the Court of Appeal regarding the EIR for the previous housing element. The city is relying on an addendum to that EIR, and the city can rely on the EIR even though there is, and the addendum, even though there is litigation pending in the Court of Appeal.
So we are able to vote today?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Kies. I'm here representing Spur. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this. We commend the planning staff for their work on this element, and we support the adoption of the draft today in order to allow many of the mayor's housing working groups initiatives to get implemented. Nevertheless, this is also the time to take a step back. Our city is attracting jobs and residents like never before, which brings resources and opportunity, but is also putting pressure on our limited housing stock. The city needs to produce between 4,000 and 5,000 new units per year and more for it to catch up with our existing deficit. The city's current work plan is unlikely to get us there. We can and should do more. A few thoughts. One, restart neighborhood planning. The city has completed an impressive set of neighborhood plans that are currently producing the vast majority of housing now underway. But right now there's only one plan in process, the Central Soma Plan. We want the planning department to start planning again to expand the long-term capacity of the city. The second is to make it easy for homeowners to add secondary units. This should be a top priority since it's one of the few ways that we'll be able to add homes in some parts of the city. Supervisor Wiener is doing an excellent job of moving this forward, and the planning department also has some exciting efforts underway. We think that we should continue to grow this effort. Third thing, launch experiments to produce middle-income housing. In general, our current housing production system is not good at meeting the needs of this group. We need to focus on experiments that would produce more housing for the middle, like student housing, conversion of underutilized hotels, and removal of the cap on micro units. Two more things. One, reject the idea of metering. We believe metering or housing balance is a misguided strategy, and that we should focus on maximizing the number of affordable units rather than focus on the percentage. The last thing is to fix the process and make it less expensive and risky to get approval to add housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Roger Ritter, President of the West of Twin Peaks Central Council, a resource organization for 20 HOAs and neighborhood organizations west of Twin Peaks. I have 3 comments on the proposed plan. First, on objective number 3, the plan says San Francisco is a city of renters. I would say, in large part, yes. But that statement by itself ignores the some 35% of San Franciscans who are homeowners. And the people whom I represent in West of Twin Peaks are almost entirely homeowners. So they certainly have a stake in what is going on. Second, policy 2.6 of the plan talks about ensuring housing supply is not converted to de facto commercial use through short-term rentals. It states the city should use abundant care in crafting allowances with strong enforceability for short-term rental units. It also points out that some forms of short-term rentals could be considered de facto commercialization, conversion to a hotel use. We in West of Twin Peaks are very concerned that single-family residential neighborhoods are being converted into hotel neighborhoods on a de facto basis without regard and in some cases in violation of the zoning laws. Last, the city's housing values, number 2, is listed as preserving neighborhood character. Once again, the character of West of Twin Peaks is primarily single-family residential, and I respectfully urge you to remember that that is part of the residential character of San Francisco, along with all of the other concerns that the other speakers have expressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Thank you. I'm Kathy DeVincenzi, and on behalf of San Franciscans for Livable Neighborhoods, which I represent, we object to the approval of the 2014 housing element and the Environmental Review Officer's issuance of the addendum to the EIR for the San Francisco 2004 and 2009 housing element on the grounds set forth in our January 28th and February 4, 2015 submissions to the Planning Commission, copies of which are attached to my letter that I submitted today. Since the Court of Appeal has not determined whether the final EIR is adequate under CEQA, the 2009 housing element has not finally completed environmental review. The bulk of the 2014 housing element has been carried forward from the policies of the 2009 housing element, but the 2009 housing element has not finally completed environmental review. The EIR for that housing element is currently being reviewed for legal adequacy by the California Court of Appeal in our appeal. Accordingly, if the court rules the EIR legally invalid, the conclusions in the addendum that the conclusions in the FEIR remain valid will be incorrect. And the city acts at its own risk if it approves the housing element under these circumstances and before the adequacy of the EIR is determined. So the city should refrain from relying upon the EIR as the basis for environmental review of the bulk of the 2014 housing element until all the appellate proceedings are concluded. And inadequate notice was provided of this meeting because my letter of comment was omitted from the commission agenda packet, which was attached to your agenda, so nobody knew about these objections or the fact that you would be acting at your own risk. And the Administrative Code Section 67.7 requires 72 hours notice of the documents that were submitted to the bodies that relate to this matter. So you can't act on this unless you correct the commission agenda packet. Thank you.
Thank you. To the city attorney's office, could you please speak on the fact that the letter was not part of the packet?
Sure. The board can act based on the notice that was provided. Any member of the public, of course, could submit documents, as I understand the speaker has done today, to the board for its consideration. But the notice of this meeting was appropriate, and the Planning Commission's submission to the board was appropriate.
Great. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Hiroshi Fukuda. I'm the chair for the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods Land Use and Transportation Committee. I'd like to read a resolution from Coalition. It says, resolved that CSFN urges the Board of Supervisors not to approve the 2014 housing element and urges the Planning Commission not to recommend adoption of the 2014 housing element because the environmental review for the majority of the policy changes carried over into the 2014 housing element was based on the analysis conducted and the conclusions reached in the EIR for the 2004 and 2009 housing element, and the validity of the EIR is still being considered by the appellate courts of California. I'd like to also make comments. Supervisor Kim, you're right. The planning department did not provide information as to what percent of the RHNA goals were reached for the last period, and for that, I could tell you that the market rate was they met the market rate. Very low, I think they met over 80%. The workforce housing, the type of housing that the data and needs analysis state that we need, I think it was about 25% or so, very low. So this housing element, based on the old ones, and housing elements didn't succeed in the past. So here they rolled that over to the new one. So we're working on a policy that failed. This housing element really needs to be redone so that the results will more match the needs of the city. And in the past, it has not done so. We are woefully behind in workforce housing. People that live in San Francisco, I think even the people in the department have a hard time justifying this report.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
These are letters. Madam Chair Cohen and Supervisor Kim, my name is John Bartis. Good afternoon. You had a very profound bit of testimony from Ms. DiVincenzi a moment ago regarding the deficiencies that have been addressed in the courts and are still being reviewed by the courts. And also the fact that her statement, which is a very important fundamental statement in making your decision regarding the matter before you, was omitted from the package that was prepared for the public, for you as supervisors for this committee hearing, and for the supervisors tomorrow if it were to pass by this committee for tomorrow's hearing. The packet was deficient. And that's really an outrageous situation for you to be in a predicament where you are obliged and the public is obliged and the members of the Board of Supervisors are obliged to look at a folder in agenda packet that is incomplete and lacks the most important statement regarding the court proceedings that are taking place that were almost completely ignored in the report by the staff in that packet. And for that reason, you should take action today to postpone this meeting for 1 week to correct that omission, because this is a flawed review process. The public has not been given the complete package to review for the agenda today and for them to make intelligent comments, and the omissions were very significant and have a very big bearing on your.
Thank you. Sir, your time is up. All right, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on item number 2? All right, seeing no members of the public, item number 2 is closed. The matter is now back in the hands of the committee. Supervisor Kim, do you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make?
No. I'll just say a couple of things. I do think that regardless of what is going on contextually in the courts with the 2009 housing element, I do think the updates that were put in 2014 are actually important to make. I think they really represent where the city is directed today, with very strong statements about preserving our existing housing stock, with protecting rent control housing, with ensuring that we are prioritizing affordable housing, and of course the statement that was brought up in public comment about ensuring that short-term rentals are not cannibalizing our home ownership or rental housing stock. These were points that were not in place back in 2009, but I think that it's important that we put that update into place today. I just did want to address the one comment that I heard earlier today about the statement that San Francisco is a city of renters, and while I think proportionally that is true, I do think that this is a broad policy document, and that each policy doesn't apply to every neighborhood, and I think the housing element certainly recognizes that there are neighborhoods that are single-family home ownership neighborhoods, and that there are also many neighborhoods that are largely rental as well. And I don't think that that statement kind of disagrees with the other. So I just want to put out that this broad policy statement should not in any way seem to be I guess not acknowledging that those types of neighborhoods exist, and that's very important to the fabric here of San Francisco. So I think that we should move this forward out of Land Use Committee for the full board next Tuesday. I think that the legal issues are still going to be in place regardless of our update, but I do think it's important for us to have the updates in place.
Just want to say, I'm sorry, this item will move forward as a committee report for the chair to entertain a motion for a committee report.
Can you maybe, Supervisor Kim, could you restate your motion?
I actually didn't make a motion. I was going to give, if you want to make some closing comments, but if the time is now, I didn't realize we were forwarding it as a committee report, but I can make a motion to move this forward as a committee report. I'm open to moving it forward either with recommendation or without recommendation.
All right, I can support it with recommendation.
Okay.
So this item, the motion has been made and accepted. This item is closed. Madam Clerk, are there any other items before this body?
Madam Chair, there's no further business before the committee.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This committee is